when I decided that I wanted to do something for Jane to memorialize her the best way that I possibly could, I thought about making this piece, and then I was overwhelmed. I thought, how on earth am I going to properly cover this woman's life? An amazing life, you know, an American rags to riches kind of story. A story about a lady who lived a multifaceted life. She had a lot of chapters, a lot of friends. She traveled the world. She, you know, was an exceptional person, bigger than life. So how do you manage to tell her story properly? And it takes me back to probably the early 2000s. Since Jane moved to Costa Rica, I would go and visit her a couple times a year. And back in, I don't know, 2002, 2003, I asked her, I said, Jane, I would love to just interview you. And this was before I was doing video production and stuff like that. It was just me wanting to talk to her and find out every detail of her fascinating life. And I said, Jane, is there any way we can sit and I just interview you and ask you a million questions about your whole life, from being a child to marrying your first husband, Larry Lane, who is Kirby's father, and then your life after that, your next marriage to Jim Ray. And that whole story is incredible. You know, it's very detailed how they met. It's extremely interesting. So I wanted to know all about that. I wanted to get the details. And if you're watching this and you've known me for a long time, you'll know that I like to ask a lot of questions. I'm really interested in interesting people. And so Jane and I sat down and we began talking. At the end of these couple days that we spent going over every detail and me asking her a million questions, I said, Jane, you need a 4-part docuseries on your life. There is no way this is a small story. This is a big story. It's fascinating. And she laughed and she said, well, if it's going to be a documentary, I would prefer it to be a BBC documentary. And I thought, wow, I wish I knew someone who could make a documentary. And again, this was early 2000s. And I thought, you know, what a great BBC documentary this would be. And Jane loved BBC. She loved BBC shows and documentaries. So I thought BBC would be a perfect choice for her documentary. So fast forward to today, and I thought about that story, and I thought, you know what? I can't do a 4-part docuseries on BBC, but, you know, I would love to do something for her, just for her memory, just because I know she's looking down and would love this. So I thought, well, hey, you know what I'm gonna do? I can do a trailer for a documentary. I thought this might be what it would look like. So check this out.
In this docuseries, we will be exploring and celebrating the life and legacy of an American icon, Jane Kirby Ray. A woman of great style, grace, wisdom, and endless generosity. We will briefly step into her world, past and present, and reflect on how she influenced, inspired, and helped all of those fortunate enough to be included in the inner circle of her inspirational life. We will hear stories old and new from her sister, Pam Sidden.
She spoiled me all of my life.
Her brother, Dick Kirby.
What they didn't know, and what no one knew at the time, is that horse didn't like to ride double.
And one of her oldest and dearest friends, Susan Stussy.
How did Jane change my life? She changed it in countless ways.
Gone but never forgotten. Her legacy will live on.
So since I'm not able to pull off a 4-part docuseries on BBC, I enlisted some help. I called upon her sister Pam, her brother Dick, and one of her oldest and dearest friends, Susan Stussy.
She defined feng shui, but she didn't really use that word. But to me, she defined harmony.
And to help me tell Jane's story. I knew I couldn't do it alone. But one thing that I do regret is that I wasn't able to pull this together, just that part that you just saw, for Jane while she was still here, because I know she would get a huge kick out of it. She would love it. And so that's one regret that I have, that, you know, I should have done it while she was still here and taken the time to create something like this for her. But I'm doing it for her now.
And now a few words from her sister, Pam Sitton.
When Julie contacted me and asked me, would it be too daunting for you to make a video concerning your life, knowing and cherishing Jane Ray, Vitra Jane Ray, by the way, although she didn't like her first name very well, and I'll add a little bit more about that later. And I thought about it very much because, yes, it is daunting in the fact that there's so much that can be said about Jane Ray by anyone and everyone who knew her, and so much that needs to be said that it is daunting. But hopefully with all of us combined who are memorializing her as someone we loved and we cherished, we will be able to say all that needs to be said about an individual who left quite a legacy. When I was thinking about the past and how my sister has inspired me, I came to the first thought of how our mother, Roxy Blagg Kirby, would tell me that she was much older when she became pregnant with me, and she was 37 and Jane was 16. So one day they were changing one of the beds, I think on a Saturday morning, and Mom decided this was the time to tell Jane that she was expecting a child. And Jane was furious when Mom told her. She said, "How could you and Dad embarrass me this way?" So it was quite a crushing blow to Mom, and I'm sure a crushing blow to Jane to think that she was going to have a baby sister at 16 years old. But I was to benefit from that because before my arrival, Jane decided that she was happy about it, the birth of another child into the family, and she wanted to name me. And she probably wanted to name me because she did not like her name, Vitra. She loved Jane, but she did not like Vitra, and rarely would she use it. And so she wanted to be in control when her little sister was born in naming hers. My name is Pamela Jean, and that is because my sister loved that name at the time. And I have never disliked my name either. I was also to benefit in the way that there may have just been a tinge of guilt in Jane not wanting me to be born initially, because in my opinion, she spoiled me all of my life. There was actually nothing that I thought my sister wouldn't do for me. She mentored me as a second mother. She encouraged me. she disciplined me occasionally on how I should walk, always tell me to put my shoulders back and pull my stomach in. And I got tired of hearing that, but I understand now why she kept saying it. Never a time did I feel that I was disturbing her or bothering her. If I needed to call her or if I needed to visit her in later life and just discuss anything that was going on in my life. And I had great confidence because she was a very discerning woman, and she was very wise and very realistic about life, and always had good advice if I asked for it. And she never failed to just be that cornerstone. And I think that's probably true of both my brothers, that they could say that, and that even our mother was very dependent upon Jane, because she was kind of, from what my understanding of her growing up, she was kind of an adult all her life and would control the situation if no one else was going to. She's had a fruitful, fulfilling life, and that was because she didn't give in. She would have to be one of the people at the very top of my list that changed my life in the direction that it probably would have gone, because of her care, her love, her direction for me, and an encouragement to further my education. And then, of course, her help in doing that. She helped me buy clothes to go to college. She would give me spending money. Not that she had a lot of money to spare at that time in her life, but she was always generous. And those of you who are listening and knew her, you know how generous she was. And almost generous to a fault in many ways, because she was such a giver. And once she gave, and she never regretted it, and she never had any strings attached to that giving. She gave of herself, she gave of her time, and she gave of the things that she had acquired. And that in itself was a trait that not a lot of people have. Even if they have means, they aren't necessarily generous to the point that when they give, they have no strings attached. But I never felt that she did. And I have some wonderful gifts that she has given me, material gifts that she has given me throughout the years that I will always cherish. But most of all, her gift of her time and her love.
And now her brother, Dick Kirby, will share some of his favourite memories and stories.
So we're going to try this. You asked some questions that I'm probably not going to be able to answer completely. I'll give you a little background first about the relationship between myself and Jane. And she was 10 years older than I was, almost to the day, like 5 days apart. When I was 6 weeks old, Dad and Mom loaded up Wendell and Jane and myself in a pickup truck with a camper and went to California to pick fruit, work in the orchards. They did that 4 times within 4 years. And the only time I remember is the very last part of the 4th year, when I was 4 years old. So for 4 years, Jane took care of me because Mom and Wendell worked in the fields. And of course, both kids tried to go to school at the same time, you know. And so it was a stressful time in their life, but they have a lot of stories to tell about it, a lot of conflict and that type of thing. But, you know, it's hard to assess what kind of influence she had on me as a baby and as a little boy, you know, 1, 2, 3 years old, 4 years old. But she was the primary caretaker of me. I do know that she told a story about how she enjoyed reading, and she would read while she was taking care of me, while I was in her arms, you know, trying to get me to go to sleep and that type of thing. And when I got a little larger, a little bigger, I remember I loved to read and still do. So maybe that had a lot of influence on me, we don't know.
And now a few words from one of her oldest and dearest friends, Susan Stussy.
The question is, how did Jane change my life? She changed it in countless ways. I admired her, I respected her, I saw her as a woman of many talents. She was a steward, and she understood and shared the grace of God, and I felt it. She was my chosen sister, and I will miss her dearly. From the moment that Kirby called me on that Sunday morning until now, I miss her. And I know that she influenced me greatly. I can't even count the ways. But I can say one thing. I wouldn't be me if I hadn't known Jane. That's how important she was to my life. I loved her. I will miss her so much. And I know exactly where she is. I love you, Jane. God bless you.
The love she had for her son, Kirby, and his daughters, Perry and Lexi, was boundless.
You know, there are so many things that can and should be said about Jane, but the thing that she would be most proud of is being a mother. She loved her son Kirby so much. He was the apple of her eye. He was her pride and joy. Throughout the years, Jane was always proudly telling me of all of his accomplishments, what a great person he was, how he was dedicated to the things that he loved. But most of all, she was very, very proud of the amazing father that he is to her two granddaughters, Perry and Lexi. She accomplished so many things, but being a good mother and having a great relationship with Kirby was her #1 priority. It took precedence over everything else. She wanted to be a part of his life. She wanted to be a part of the girls' lives. She was so proud of all of them. She was very proud of the girls. She loved how much they loved each other as sisters. And again, she was just over the moon with what a wonderful father and person Kirby was. So I know everything that we're talking about today and all the things, like I said, that she did accomplish and all of the beautiful homes that she created. Her #1 favorite thing in the world was her family, and definitely Kirby and the girls. They were everything to her.
More from Susan Stussy.
How did Jane inspire my life? Well, that's a short question with many long answers, but I'm gonna try to be concise. Jane inspired me to be the best version of me. I knew that I could really reach up to her level, and she never wanted that. She just wanted me to be the best me, and that's what I tried to be. She was an exemplary person. I could say that I admired her greatly, and that's true. She had so many qualities, so many fine qualities. She was very generous in many ways, just with her time and her talent and her many gifts. If you call Jane for anything, she was there. She was always there, and I appreciated that. She was so generous with her family. She had every right to brag, but she never did. Never. It was not her style. She could have, she chose not to. When she told me what she was doing, it was just a matter of course. It was just something about her life, and she shared everything with me. I shared everything with her too. I often said, if you had a friend like Jane, you wouldn't need a counselor. Forget therapy, right? But I always did have Jane, and I always did lean on her. We were the closest of friends. We were heart friends for a lifetime. So when Kirby called me that Sunday morning, I felt very sad from that moment until this moment, because I knew that day and right now that I could never replace Jane in my life. It's not possible. So if you have a friend like that, you know what I'm talking about. And if you don't have a friend like that, I hope that someday you will have, because it's a wonderful feeling to receive that kind of love and friendship. She was my heart sister and my chosen sister. I admired her greatly, and I do miss her.
More from Pam Sitton.
One of my favorite memories of Jane, 2 big trips, just she and I went on. We went to Israel and Jordan, and then we went to China. Particular thing that I remember about our Jordan trip, we went to Petra, which was an amazing opportunity. It is definitely a wonder of the world, and we had this Jordanian guide, and going to Petra is like stepping back in time, and it was just a fabulous day, and we just had just a fond memory time of all of it. But the guide was a gentleman about her age, and I could tell he was taking a liking to Jane, and that was not hard to do. I mean, she turned a lot of heads, a lot of people. She was such a beautiful lady. A lot of heads turned just to look at her, and he was taking quite a liking to her. And so that evening we were staying in a hotel nearby, and we were never to see him again. But he asked if she would meet him in the hotel lobby and have coffee that evening. Well, she wasn't planning to do that, but I encouraged her to, mostly because just of his culture and just learning about an individual from Jordan and his life as a guide and the people that he had guided. And I said, it'll be interesting, you'll find out a lot of things. And so she, after we had dinner and we rested a little bit, then she went on down to the lobby, and she was gone just a short time, and she came back and she said, he stood me up. And she was so aggravated that she had gone to the trouble, and I couldn't believe he stood her up. Who knows what happened? But that was one of the fond memories of, I have so many. I have so many memories.
More stories from Dick Kirby.
I picked out a couple of incidents I'm going to tell you about that have some reflection on her personality, I guess you might say, or indications of her personality. The first one I want to tell you about is when she was like 15. We lived on Clouds Creek. It was a long hollow that went north and south from where we lived. We lived at the bottom of it, you might say. Up the creek and up the hollow about 2 miles. So you could go across Colcord Ranch and hit the country road and go up maybe another mile to Aunt Edna's house. So it was only like 3.5 miles. So I know they used to walk back and forth to visit. So Jane on a Saturday decided that she was going to go up there and visit, and we always had horses, and they were essential to the way we were living at that time, you know. And Dad had a horse that was a white horse, kind of a smoky colored on him, Old Smoke. He was a good horse. He was cooperative, and he did what he was asked to do. So Jane saddled him up and took him up there and visited, and she came back. She and one of the girls came with her. And my memory says it was Donna Porter, because I remember she had very, very dark hair, so I'm pretty sure it was Donna. And Donna was probably 3 years younger than Jane, so she convinced her. Now, I saw the end of the encounter. I was out in the garden across the road, and you could see down the pasture as they came back, and they were sort of a mess. Both of them, their hair was kind of disheveled and had pieces of grass in their hair. their genes had grass spots on them and so forth. What they didn't know, and what no one knew at the time, is that horse didn't like to ride double. So when they started back, he bucked them off, you know. But here's where the character of Jane came in. Instead of taking an easy route, saying, well, Donna, you ride, I'll lead, and when I get tired, I'll ride and you can lead. No, this apparently in her mind had become a contest that she was going to win. And so she got back on the horse, convinced Donna to get back on the horse, and they did this several times, you know, and got bucked off several times. But when they came up the pasture, where I could actually see them, you know, and I still didn't know what was going on. She had conquered the horse, you might say. And the reason I know all the details is because they went, as soon as they let the horse loose, took the saddle off, let him in the corrals, went in the house, started telling Mom about this story of what had happened. This crazy horse, Old Smoke, had thrown him like 4 or 5 times, you know. Of course, I heard all the details. I was so quiet and very seldom spoke that people seemed to forget that I was there, and I heard all kinds of stories that way. But anyhow, you know, it's just like an indication of the character that she had. She would fight, I guess you might say, instead of compromising. And on top of that, she convinced Donna to participate in it. So that was an indication of the combative nature of her personality to a large degree. Now, that's not the only indications of her personality. She is many-sided. She had a lot of other assets and liabilities, as we all do. Okay, the second story I'm going to tell you is about the same time. She was a year older, like 16, and this involved her and a friend she had called Sue Thompson. Sue Thompson lived up the same hollow, only she was a little bit closer than Edna's house, and Sue was a classmate of Jane's in high school, well, in grade school and high school. And she had walked down the hollow to visit Jane, and Wendell was 13 years old, so he was 3 years younger than Jane, more or less, you know. And if any of you knew Wendell then, or later, he loved to tease people. And if you were on the end of it, it wasn't too nice. If you were observing it, it was pretty funny sometimes. But anyhow, he kept needling Jane and Sue and irritating him, to the extent that finally, I guess, sort of spontaneously, they just grabbed him and wrestled him to the ground. And Mom had a clothesline on the south side of the house, and they had one of those big heavy quilts out there. And they wrapped him up in the quilt in the yard, and got the garden rake and the broom and began to beat on him. You know, I'm sure that it was not as traumatic as he said, and probably a little more traumatic than they said. Anyhow, if Wendell told the story, it was almost death. You know, he said I almost died. You know, they suffocated me in that quilt. If Jane was there and told the story, it wasn't nearly that bad, of course. Here again is an indication of the combative nature of her personality. In other words, she and Wendell were very, very close. I think they had a great affection for one another, but yet by the same instance, they fought a lot.
She loved hard. She cherished her relationships. One of the things that Kirby and I talked about was that never did and he agreed, did we hear the words afraid or scared come from her mouth. Those were 2 words that she did not allow to come from her mouth. And he even said that she would scold him if he said that he was scared of something. And you know, there's much to be said about that, because God tells us in the scripture over 360, well, I think at least 365 times, do not be afraid. So the things that she accomplished and the bravery that she displayed, I think was totally due to the resolve of not being afraid and not letting fear hold her back from anything. And that just was something that has helped me in my life, is to push forward and not let fear get a grip on me. Overall, I just am, of course, saddened by Jane going on and being in heaven today. I'm happy about that, but I'm so sad that we don't have her, because she was such a strength of this family. I take joy, though, when I do get sad and become emotional. I take such joy in the fact that she did live life to the fullest. She saw she saw the whole world, and she loved, and she left such a wonderful legacy. So, sister, if I could say anything to you right now, I would say, well done. Well done.
Gone but never forgotten, her legacy will live on. In the words of her sister, Pam Sitton, well done, well done. Bravo.